Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and and we'll just. Oh, I was just about to we'll fold all the new ones that come in as they have, but we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to be speaking with Stephen Kercher this afternoon. Now he can run through who he is again in a moment. My name is Deborah Lundeen. Um, I'm with WiSys, and I am the manager for research development. So I'll be helping to moderate the discussion in this room today. Just for my own, to provide my own background, I actually have my bachelor's and master's in history and my doctor of education in adult higher and community education. So I too kind of went the route of graduate school myself. But what I'd like to do, I'd like to have this to be a really, conversational space. If we can, I would like to kind of have this as like a group meeting. So if you could come on the camera so that we can kind of, make kind of make some connections this afternoon, I'd really appreciate that. For those of you, I mean, really, we are really here just to answer any burning questions that you have. I mean, I myself was a first generation student, so I didn't have anybody in my family who blazed the graduate school trail for me. So I really was my own person having to figure it all out. And so if we can help answer those questions for you here today, we're happy to do so. If you guys have any questions that you'd like to start out with for Stephen after he introduces himself again, raise your hand or unmute and go ahead and just, start asking your questions. Stephen, you go ahead and take it over for just a moment.
Sure. Okay. Once again, thank you for attending the session. I hope that I can provide you with some insight and some advice as you're thinking about applying to graduate school, or maybe if you're just even thinking about abstractly about the possibility of attending graduate school. I commend you for thinking about it because it's a very difficult decision, and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of planning. And it's not planning that you should start in your senior year. It's planning that should go well into your whole undergraduate career. I'm going to ask, because, this is just a cool, small group. Let's just go around and have everyone just briefly introduce. I'll call your name. If you could just say who you are, what school you attend, and just briefly what kind of graduate program you're thinking of attending. Adrian, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So just like you, Dr. Kercher, I'm at UWO, and I'm an undergraduate student. Oh, I forgot to say my name, Adrian Hanrahan. But yeah, I'm an undergraduate English student with minors in Spanish and social justice. And so I'm hoping to, in the future, pursue a PhD in English so that I can teach at the college.
Wow. Okay. Nice to meet you. Julie.
Hi, my name is Julie. I am currently at UW Green Bay. I'm a double major of English and history. And what I'm just currently looking at is graduate school on the English course.
Great. That's fantastic. Score 2 for English. Noah, are you in English too?
Yes, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm no longer. I'm undergrad at UW Oshkosh as well. My plan, or I'm entertaining the idea, I guess. It's not really set in stone, but I'd like to go in directions of either teaching at the professional level of like English, philosophy, psychology, somewhere in those areas. They're very interesting for me.
Great. Hi, Louisa.
Hello, Professor. My name is Louisa Nelson. I am also a UWO, Go Titans. I am right now, as of today, a education major, and honestly, with a history minor. And I'm really here because I really haven't thought of graduate school at all. So I'm really curious and very interested to find out kind of what, what graduate options are there and how to go about it.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Will.
Hi, I'm Will O'Brien. I'm also in English. I'm at UW Eau Claire, minoring in theater, hoping to pursue a PhD in English, particularly literature.
That's great. Nick, are you there?
Yes, I am. Oh, so hi, I'm Nick, and I'm also a UWO student, and I'm looking to go into social work.
Great. Okay. Antonio. How about Fabian? Are you there, Fabian?
Yes, I'm here. My name's Fabian. I am a UWO undergrad as well. I am majoring in political science, and I am hoping to pursue my master's in public administration and emphasize in healthcare administration.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. You know, Deborah, we as the planning committee for Spark, we've been talking about whether students read their emails over the summer. And I think the Oshkosh students do read their emails because I just sent it out yesterday. So kudos to all of you from Oshkosh. I'm going to tell you guys something that I normally tell anyone who comes into my office. And I get a lot of people who come into my office and say they're interested in graduate school. Okay, I've been doing the same thing for 21 years. And the first thing that I say to someone who's thinking about graduate school is, and this is kind of a bummer, and that is to make sure that they understand in a way that I didn't understand. I too was kind of a first generation student, had no clue about graduate school, just kind of had an odd conception that, you know, I wanted to become a professor. But I think for me, not knowing the realities of the academic marketplace were a bonus for me, because if I had known about the realities of the academic marketplace, I might not have gone for it. And the brutal reality is, as you may hear from your professors, that you know, the ranks of the professoriate are already pretty stuffed, pretty full, depending on your field, depending on your specialty, and that it's really hard. It's very, very competitive. And I just always introduce that dose of reality, because someone needs to tell you that academic life is, it's a difficult career to get into. All right. And then after the student begins to display visible signs of distress or being slightly bummed out, I immediately follow up with something that I also believe really very, very deeply. And that is, if you really think that you want to devote your life to a field that you love, if you think that you have the ability to be really good at it, then you have no other option. It's not even a question. You've got to go for it, right? Because, you know, that's the stuff that makes a career. What you want to do, what you want to pursue, what the life that you want to have is where you live and breathe your career. I mean, there are family and other things matter as well, but you know, it's a great life. You see all the books to live in a world of ideas and devote yourself to teaching young people and to engage in research is a very fulfilling life. And here's the thing. If you really, really love what you're going to do, you will work hard and you will do well. And it's very worthwhile to pursue graduate study on that account. I also want to say real quickly that I noticed that, Deborah, you mentioned that you had a minor in history and ultimately, or I'm sorry, a master's in history, and ultimately you're not a historian.
No.
And that's a great thing. And what I also say to students, coming from a perspective of someone who's been around the block a lot, is that you have to really keep this in mind. And that is, life, the trajectory that you will all take has no rhyme or reason. It is not a straight line. It is not from here to here. It is from here to here, right? And you might pursue graduate work thinking that you're going to go in this one direction. But what I've observed with people like Deborah and many of the people I went to graduate school with is that they start in graduate school and they think they're going to go one way, but they end up ultimately taking many very satisfying career paths that start in graduate school, but ultimately don't end in the way that they initially thought. Right? I have friends from graduate school who've gone into the world of publishing, into public sector work. I have friends who didn't become professors in universities, but instead are now teaching at community colleges. And some people might think, well, community college, then you really didn't make it. Hell no. The one good friend who I know from graduate school who's at a community college likes to brag that she goes surfing every day because it's a community college on a beach in California somewhere. So, there are a lot of great other ways to teach other than a university track. So keep those things in mind, that graduate school is definitely worth pursuing if you love it. And that ultimately, what the endpoint could be could vary for each of you. But if you love it, you should go for it. Should I say anything, Deborah, about just some tips or advice that I normally give? Would that be helpful? Would all of you like some general advice? Like, I'll give you like 3 things, okay? Because it's not been mentioned yet, but believe it or not, GRE scores matter. If you don't know this already, in order to apply to graduate school, you will have to take the GRE. How many of you know that already? Have you heard of the GRE? So it's like the ACT or the equivalent SAT for graduate school. And it really does matter. From my experience, I've observed that getting a high GRE score. So that means that you'll actually have to go back and prepare a little bit for the exam. I never would have dreamed of preparing for an exam, but the GRE exam is something that's worth preparing for, because many of us haven't taken math in 4 or 5 years and don't remember too much calculus, or there are things that you can do to prepare for the GRE, and those things pay dividends. I have a student who just got into Stanford a couple of years ago, and that's probably the premier graduate program in the field. And one of the reasons that she did, I'll say there are several reasons. One of them is because she studied for the GRE. She took a gap year, between the time that she graduated and the time that she went to graduate school, so that she could do the kind of things, make a little money, and study for the GRE, and relieve herself of that pressure of taking the GRE in her senior year, right? The other thing that she did, and I can't stress this enough, this is my most important message for all of you, is that she took advantage of every opportunity for research that the UW Oshkosh provides. Every one of you, especially you those of you who attend UW Oshkosh, have opportunities because I network with research directors at other universities. All of you have opportunities to pursue collaborative research with professors on your campuses and participate in scholarship days, publish articles in undergraduate research journals, pursue research and present your research at conferences. This is a must. And it's a great thing. It's really something that will test you and encourage you to get serious about graduate school if you were to engage in research with a professor on campus, meet a professor, talk with them about the possibility of having them mentor your research, and then taking that research in the directions that it will lead you. Publishing, as I said before, presenting your work at a conference, all of those things. That's an experience that will leap out to any graduate school admissions counselor or anyone who is looking for evidence of your ability to do graduate work. that's a really, really great way to stand up and to stand apart from the crowd. Okay. Those are two things. I have others, but I'll stop it there and encourage you to ask questions. Any questions? I'm happy to answer any question you might have. Who wants to start? Will.
Yeah, what's funding like for graduate school? Because like I know from like the little bit of research that I've done, there are some programs that say like we guarantee, like for PhD programs, they guarantee between 5 to 6 years of funding. But is that like fully funded where, you know, you're going to get tuition remission and then also like a stipend to pay for like the bare minimum basics of like survival, like your food, your rent, your insurance, what have you? Or like, is there really not a way that you can get through graduate school without going into like a pretty deep hole of debt?
That's a really, really great question, and it's really important. The strategy that you should take when you think about applying to a graduate school, I tell my students that you should construct a kind of portfolio of institutions. You have on the upper third, you have a group of institutions that are great. Professor X is an expert in my field. Let's say you're interested in late Victorian literature. This is the professor who I really, really want to work with. She's well known. She's published books. I love her scholarship. This is the program. You know, you should have a small collection of schools that are in that range. I would also recommend that you consider a good mid-range of schools, state institutions, solid reputations, maybe not the cream of the crop, but really good, you know, well-rounded programs with a lot of professors who you could possibly work with. And then if you're really committed to the idea of going to graduate school, then maybe a few schools as fallbacks, as schools that you could get into. Now, you might ask, why even bother with the fallback schools? Because if you start a graduate program in a less distinguished graduate program, you still have the ability to prove to yourself and to others that you're capable of doing better work at a higher level, and you can transfer. So you could get your master's degree at institution X and then apply for the PhD track at institution Y, right? That's not that uncommon, right? So that's the reason why you'd want to do that. In all cases, money will be a consideration, right? Those top tier programs may accept you, but they may not be able to provide you with a financial package that would pay for it. And at that point, you have to ask, is there a possibility that if I'm accepted into the program and I'm not promised funding initially, is there a chance that after a year, financial support could be reconsidered, right? And that's a question that you would have with an individual program, right? Most forms of financial assistance come in the form of scholarships where I was lucky enough to get a scholarship, but 2 of my 4 years, I got 2 years that were scholarship at Indiana University. And Indiana was a really good program, not Ivy League. If I went to an Ivy League school, I probably would have had to pay, I probably would have gotten into big time debt. But Indiana was a school, a really good graduate program with really great professors. And I got a 4-year deal, full support, and it was like a no-brainer, right? For me at that point. Not entirely sure if I wanted to go to graduate school or if I wanted to become a professor. But Will, the other very, very common form of financial support comes in the form of teaching. And this is highly recommended. For those of you who want to think about teaching college, if your idea of going to graduate school is because you want to become a professor, this is really important, right? Because you will get paid to become an instructor, commonly called assistant instructor, or TA is nomenclature that's used very commonly. And you won't be a TA in your first year, but you could become a TA in your second year. And that when you work as a TA, you're actually a kind of discussion room leader in for a big pit class where the professor you're working under has you meet in the smaller groups. And in my case, it's sort of hard to believe because I was only like 23 when I was doing this. You're grading the exams, all of the exams. That's why R1 institution professors don't bother grading anything at the lower levels. That's why TAs do, but you get paid to do it. And I can tell you, as someone who's hired a lot of people in my department, in the history department, that matters in the end because you're looking for a young assistant professor who has teaching experience. And you get that teaching experience. And then if you're fortunate, let's say you've done your 2 years of graduate, TAing or something like that, then when you're writing your dissertation, and let's face it, in the fields of English and in history, you're going to be writing your dissertation for maybe 4 or 5 years because you'll need to support yourself by teaching other classes, and you will hopefully teach your own class. And the only way that they would hire you to teach your own class is by knowing that you're able to teach as a TA. Am I making sense so far? I want to make sure that I know this is kind of way outside of your experience. So I want to make sure that I'm absolutely clear. So yeah, a combination of funding for teaching and through financial support, finding the right school with the right mix of the expertise, of the experience, but also the financial assurance that you will need in order to make it feasible, I think is the right mix. And there's no ideal mix for any two people. It will all depend on your risk tolerance, your commitment, and a number of other factors. Great question. What other questions do you have? Adrian.
So you had recommended, getting involved in research like as early as possible and as much as possible during one's undergraduate career. And so I have a little bit of experience with that so far because I'm working on getting a paper published in Oshkosh Scholar. But I was wondering if there are other journals or like conferences that are like particular favorites of yours or like recommendations that you would give to an undergrad who's trying to like get into that sort of practice.
Well, that's a great question, and I applaud you for Oshkosh Scholar. For those of you who aren't in Oshkosh, Oshkosh Scholar, to my knowledge, is the only undergraduate peer-reviewed research journal in the state of Wisconsin, and we're very proud at Oshkosh to support that. That's a real. I mean, look, Adrian, you will say in your graduate essay that I'm published in a peer-reviewed journal already. It's like, I can't guarantee that you're going to get into your program of your choice, but that's really impressive. And that's something that's a feather in your cap. Each field has, professors are notified of certain undergraduate conferences in your field. Or even if you did a Google search for undergraduate conference in English, you could probably pull up some examples, right? They do exist. There aren't many. In history, there are a few, just a few out there. You could ask the English department to help fund your participation. And the university departments in our college do help fund your travel expenses. So that's the added thing, is you may not have to pay for this all of your on your own. And that's something you work with your professor, your mentor, and they will be able to help you, one, identify a conference that's right for you, and two, do what's necessary in order to possibly get some funding to help you be able to pay for it. I'm going to say one other thing. Every university in Wisconsin supports students who present their research at NCUR, the National Conference on Undergraduate Research. And if it hadn't been for COVID, then I would have taken students to the National NCUR conference And this year, I think it's being held in California, and I will take students. And watch out for my emails, or if you're on another campus, watch out for the emails for the research administrator who will say, I invite you to apply to present your research at NCUR. And I would love to take a group of good students with me. I always do, and it's a great experience. NCUR is an interdisciplinary conference for students all over the country in every imaginable field. And it is such a great conference because it provides participants with the ability to not only present their work, but to meet enterprising graduate school bound students all over the country. It's really heady stuff. And I've seen students from Oshkosh engage in discussions and debates in Q&A sessions at conferences that are just like the kind of things that I see at professional conferences at the professional level. And that's really awe-inspiring for even jaded old professors like me to see students who are the next generation of potential professors really getting into the whole conference experience. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Deborah, I don't want to take away from your responsibility, so I'll let you get back to moderating.
Well, sure. I see that Noah has his hand raised, so it looks like he may have a question for you.
Yeah, just I guess all I wanted to ask really was I've had trouble finding the best way to look for universities that are maybe have things that I'm interested. Like, what would you suggest for the best way to look for like universities that are like things you're interested in, such as like specific fields in English, like you said, like late Victorian era or whatever, philosophy, whether that's like
Right.
or the different fields of exercise or philosophy.
Noah, do you have a good working relationship with professors on campus?
A couple of them, yeah.
That's your guide. Those are the people who will be able to tell you because they know your field or the field that you're interested in, and they should be able to tell you if they're research active who some of those people are, or where the best graduate programs in a niche could possibly be. I would encourage all of you here today to not be shy about approaching a professor. I would say one of the remarkable things as a professor that I still, still kind of amazes me is that how reticent students are to ask professors for advice. Don't be shy, Noah. Don't be shy, Adrian or Julie. Just go to a professor, and I can assure you that all of us love our fields. All of us love what we do. And if a student comes to our office and says, I'm interested in studying this, or a career in this, or a specialization in this weird, we would take interest in that and help guide you. I would also say that, Noah, you could, if you found a scholar doing a particular type of scholarship that interested you, you could simply email that professor and say, hi, I'm Noah Lindberg. I'm a student at so-and-so. I really admire your work. I'm really interested in your work. I'm interested in attending graduate school. Could you tell me something about your graduate program, or do you have any other graduate programs that you might recommend? Right? They would find that question from an earnest, note that, earnest, polite, enterprising student. There's no way they're not going to answer that. They will be flattered, maybe too strong a word, but I think they'll be pleased to answer to answer your question. Because Noah, we're all in this together. We all love what we do. We all love scholarship. We all love research. We're all, frankly, a little bit weird. We're a little bit outside of the margins in our society because we're really turned on by the world of ideas, and we love what we do.
If I could just quickly interject in terms of reaching out to your undergraduate professors, you'll likely find yourself in need of letters of reference when you're entering graduate school. And those will also be some of the origins of those letters of reference. Okay.
Absolutely.
Does
If
anybody, oh, please go ahead.
I apologize.
Nope, you go right ahead.
Professor, thank you for your insight. I think for me, I can kind of get, where Noah's coming from, because my first year in college was this past COVID year. I do feel reticent about going to professors. I do feel, because first of all, maybe they don't know the students. I had lots of online classes. And you just never know how many students they have that are asking the same thing. So I think that's kind of where I would feel a little bit hesitant, and I do feel hesitant. I've had to ask for reference letters for scholarships. But if you don't mind, maybe I'm just being, maybe it's because this is, again, I'm going back in, but when you say research, Professor, can you help me a little bit about what exactly you're talking about? Are we talking about maybe, in terms of history, or you're talking about business? Can you maybe explain that? I maybe it's a dumb question, but I guess, again, I've never thought about this far ahead. You're the one that really inspired me, Professor, to even think about this. So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from with that. Like, really, just the research.
It's not a stupid question. And, it's so interesting that you say this, because I find that so many undergraduate students don't even, and this it's understandable. They don't understand that research is the pillar of a university, because professors don't talk about it very often. Some professors, they teach a class and then they don't make any mention of their own research or how their own research connects with what they're teaching. Research is the lifeblood of a university, of higher education. And when we talk about research, we're talking about investigation into original ideas. And sometimes they're not always completely original, like mind-blowing original, but it's the open investigation of some problem. It's the pursuit of some question that you might have in a field that is answered through the use of archival materials, through the use of reading of texts, through, if you're in social science, through the use of experiments or experimental design, in the field of education, through the collaboration with a school to design a study that will help shed light on some big question that you might have. Often research is very derivative, meaning that it's informed by other research that's been done. So when you ask a research question, you're not the first person to ask this research question. You might be someone who's asking a question slightly differently than it's been asked before. Research is many different things, but it's notably, it's original, and it is meant to really use a wide variety of sources in order to come to some conclusion. And the conclusion might be a provisional answer to a question, but it will contribute to a body of knowledge that will help advance the field and the way that we understand things. I'm a historian, and as a historian, my insights into history, the things that I'm learning and hopefully contributing to an understanding of American history, and this is what I like about being a scholar, is not just directed towards my fellow professors in the academy, but my scholarship will help inform, hopefully, public understanding of our history. And that's a very worthwhile type of research as well. It's not research that's only aimed at the elite publications and a very small readership. I contribute to, let's say, public scholarship, what we call public history, and exhibits that see a wider audience. And that's also a good way to share research, not just in a small audience. Does that help you at all?
Stephen, I wonder if we could,
it really does. Thank you.
I think for Louise and the others, I wonder if you could expand upon kind of what you were talking about and what the graduate school experience looks like and how it differs from undergraduate. So, I mean, from my own experience, when I went into history graduate school, my university world shrunk down to my history building and the library, right? And so, what does the coursework kind of look like? Different, graduate to undergraduate, and I think it kind of feeds into this. You're learning those, you're doing more research in a narrower lane based on the program you've entered.
You're so right. It is. Here's the word I would use, but this should inspire you. It's intense because, and this is the great thing, because when you're in graduate school, you're focused on, let's say, I wouldn't even go so far as it's not a specialty. Graduate programs will still have you read fairly broadly in English, in US history. Even to get my degree to get my PhD, I still had to have minor fields that had nothing to do with my specialty. So a lot of us who enter graduate school don't really know exactly what they want to do for their dissertation, or even who they want to work with. You might think I want to work with Professor X, but you might end up working with Professor Y because Professor X's work, after you really get into it a little bit more, isn't really that exciting to you anymore. Or you learn in your first year that Professor Y's field is more interesting and potentially more valuable for a career choice. That happens all the time. You have no idea how much your minds are going to be blown in graduate school when you get there. It is nothing like undergraduate school. The level, and that's a great thing. It takes you to the next level, and the amount of work that you will do. Deborah is suggesting here that you don't have a lot of free time, but it's great, right? This is the one time in your life. Even professors like me Deborah, I mean, back me up on this. When in your adult life, you will never have the opportunity like you have in graduate school to steep yourself in the world of ideas and commit yourself 100% to research and the field. Because when you become a professor, you have to go to committee meetings, and you have to, I don't want to say have to teach, you get to teach, but it's a different range of responsibilities. And the great thing about graduate school is that it forces you to submerge yourself into the field and to understand the depth and the breadth of the field in ways that, undergraduate, the undergraduate experience doesn't even, it's not even close. So yeah, it's wonderfully intense, and you should be prepared for that.
I think Fabian may have had a question, or maybe we answered it through this last interchange, but Fabian, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yes, Dr. Kerch, as I mentioned, I am pursuing or plan on pursuing a master's in public administration and with an emphasis in healthcare. So I've been personally affected by a rare genetic disorder known as hemophilia. So I plan on conducting, or at least would like to conduct research on programs and ways that I could affect patients with bleeding disorders in a more, I guess, not so medical way. I don't know how to refer it to, but I guess just not as in like more of a management practice opposed to medicine.
Right.
So recently I was looking at whether to pursue a master's in public administration or go into human services leadership. Which would you recommend for
It sounds
this
to
type
me
of
like
research?
It sounds to me like MPA is the route for you, although I'm not an expert in the field. Public policy, the marriage of public policy and healthcare policy, I would, do you know Samantha Larson?
Yes, I actually took an intro to public administration last semester with her.
Well, talk to Dr. Larson, and she, as an expert in her field, would really tell you where the great mix or the cross, the intersection of public policy and medicine, will really take you. And it might be the case that you will want to get graduate training in medical policy, right? Which is a different track entirely. And you should know about that now rather than later, because that could very well be the most fulfilling. And what I like, Fabian, about what you've said is that you have a deeply personal reason to go to graduate school and become an expert. And that's awesome. That's really great, because those are the people who are really committed to making a difference in the world, because they are compelled by a personal knowledge of a problem that needs to be solved, hence the research, right? And will be extra motivated to ask the kind of questions that need to be answered.
Thank you.
Julie, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, so I was, how should I put this? So there's a lot of talks about like internships and like getting internships, especially as undergraduate, especially if you're planning to try to get a career in the kind of major that you're working with, and having internships is a good way to build a foundation to go that way. But from what I'm hearing, also like we have a lot of like research that we should do alongside it. So I'm currently about to go into my senior year, so I'm thinking about this super late, but where exactly should I balance out the things that I'm looking at now? Because I've currently, I'm managing editor of the university's journal that we have, and that's the current internship that I'm working at now. I finished up one with our teaching press just this summer. So I'm thinking, like, should I continue with the internship way that I'm going with, especially because the outlook that I'm looking at is working in a publishing house, or should I try to start focusing more on going into research just to get the graduate school finished before I continue on going with more with like a career-wise choice?
Could you tell me again, could you remind me what field you ultimately would like to get into, and what graduate program?
It's an English graduate program.
And you're interested in editing?
Yeah.
Okay. And what school do you go to?
I'm currently at UWGB.
Okay. All right. Because I'm always looking for student editors for the Oshkosh Scholar. Adrian knows what I'm talking about. Well, that's great. This question of internships versus research, there's no one exact way. I think research in fields like English, traditional English, if you want to be an English professor, and if you want to commit your career to, engaging in research as an academic, might push you in the direction of doing research as an undergrad. But it sounds to me like you're getting very good practical experience doing editing, which is, I think, in this your particular case, just as valuable. I don't want to stress you guys out into thinking that you have to do all of these things. And Julie, if you don't do research and you only have internships, that's not the case. I think the fact that you're already applying yourself in demonstrated ways and exhibiting your interest in something that's giving you practical experience is a real bonus. So I think that's great.
Well, we have about a couple of minutes left. I've thoroughly enjoyed all the conversation. I really appreciate all the students, coming on camera or not and asking the questions that they're looking for answers for. So does anybody else have any questions that they would like to ask Stephen before we go back into the main room? Stephen, is there anything during some of your responses that you wish you could have expanded upon more, or anything that struck you that, maybe this would be another something to provide to the students?
Hey, I'm a professor, so there's always something that I could expand upon, right, Louisa?
Well, let me ask you another moderated question. And you kind of hinted at it earlier from one of your maybe former students, and that is, talking about the gap year and whether or not there's value in it or concerns with it, and just making sure of, if you do it, what does that look like?
I think the choice is there are a lot of people who do it, and a lot of people who are in addition to being a professor, I'm a father, and my advice to my own kids is slow down, relax, take a deep breath, because you're really, really young, and you don't need to start graduate school. Graduate school is a long stretch, depending on your discipline, but you don't need to be in graduate school by the time you're 20 or 21. There is some, over the long stretch, having that year to really think carefully about which program you want to get into, and that takes research. Noah, you're thinking about programs. You may not really have all the time that you need in your senior year to identify that program or to study for the GRE. Give yourself a little bit of time, work, make some money, alleviate some of the financial stress that you will be feeling having just graduated from college and maybe having some student loans to pay off, and anticipating the fact that you might have to pay for graduate school in the future. In our economy these days, if it's anything like this a year from now, like it is now, you can make really good money right out of college, working in any type of job, and devoting yourself and taking a year off and enjoying the world before you immerse yourself into this graduate experience that that is so wonderful, but obviously confining in the way that your opportunities for socialization and other things is a little bit more limited. Looks like we've got 30 seconds, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for your time this afternoon. We really
I'm happy.
appreciate it. I'm sure all the Oshkosh students in this room will find you for more questions.
And if you don't go to UW Oshkosh, my email address is kercher@uwosh.edu. Tell me you were here, ask a question, and I'd be happy to respond.